In a single word, catharsis. Yep, that's it. That's the secret sauce of turn-based combat. I guess I'll see y'all Friday, and hope you enjoyed. Okay, well, I should probably explain what I mean a little bit, at least. Let me start by asking a surprisingly complex question. What makes a good video game? The cop-out answer would be, well, a lot of things. And that's not untrue. Depending on what the dev team focuses on, there are many ways to make a game good. Do you focus on the controls? How about just having a good story? What about just making it look good? Often, though, it doesn't need to be just one of these things that makes a good game. The best games often have so many of these being kind of a pivotal focus. Okay, well, if that's the case, then let me ask a slightly harder question. How do you make good gameplay for a video game when player input is not exactly the focus of a game? The short answer? You cheat. The long answer? You focus on cinematics. As a self-proclaimed action game fan, it is very, very difficult for me to get into turn-based combat. I've mentioned before in other videos that I've made that combat in a video game needs to feel really good in order for me to be immediately invested in it. This is why I never meshed with MMOs. And similarly, it's why I can't mesh with turn-based combat in almost exactly the same ways. Say for instance you're playing a turn-based game. You click the attack button and your character does an animation. Compare this instead to an action game, where you're more or less puppeteering a character. They still do an attack, but there's more agency for the player to have. It's more instinctual. When do I attack? Should I attack right now? In a turn-based game, there's a lot more watching and waiting. And I find in most scenarios that doesn't necessarily work for me. Despite this, there is still plenty of turn-based games that I do like playing. And the reason, I think, is because the unsung hero in this scenario is the cinematic feel of the combat itself. Allow me to present an example on screen for a minute. Go ahead and take a quick look at this clip from Fire Emblem. Really study it and pay attention to what makes the combat feel good despite very little player agency.
Let's go.
That was pretty sick, right? But now just go ahead and try to figure out how many little things helped with making that combat encounter feel good. In 3 blanket terms, I'm going to say sound design, tension, and kinetic feeling cinematics. It is at this point I now want to break down these 3 bullet points, and really get to the roots of why these work. Let's go ahead and start off with sound design. Proper battle music in a turn-based game is always great. And I'll always have a particular soft spot for whenever game OST dynamically adapts to whatever's happening on screen. In the case of the newer Fire Emblems, there's always 2 music tracks that hover back and forth whenever a gameplay session is going on. One much calmer that fits the general strategy parts of the game, maybe helping to calm you down and clear your mind a little bit. And then it smoothly transitions into a more action-focused track. The transition here helps to cement that this is the same battle happening. You, as a player, are just using your omnipotent player powers to basically make it to where you can take as much time as you want to think about your next step ahead. And the action music helps you get hyped up for whenever those moments happen. You've set out a plan and now you have to act it out. And hopefully, if it goes your way, the music helps it feel really, really good when you accomplish that battle. And these are good, but there's actually very few games that even use adaptive OST. But this isn't the end of sound design here. Consider the impact of a weapon on a character. In all of these instances, they're almost exaggerated in a way. When successfully hitting a target, both on the player's receiving end or the enemy's receiving end, it makes the successful hit feel decisive. Even if you don't end up defeating the enemy, you're still one step closer. And to me, it feels like the game kinda knows that, and it's almost congratulating you on that front. It goes, yeah, good job, here's your damage. And it's all of these things that help the combat feel kinetic. Think about most turn-based RPGs and consider that every character has to jump into an attack almost. And they do so with reckless abandon, seemingly, to carry out your command that you ushered onto them. And specifically, it's not just Fire Emblem that does this. There are many turn-based games that have this as sort of a animation checklist they have to make, basically, if they're going for a turn-based combat system anyway. Turn-based RPGs, first and foremost, are strategy games, which may or may not be the coldest take I've ever had. Even still, the strategy gameplay adds a lot to the tension of the game. You don't really know how much damage an enemy is going to do to you until they launch their attack. And if it's already getting really dicey, then you have to hope for that 10% mischance in order to not take any damage. What's cool though is that tension in turn-based games can be tackled in a whole bunch of different ways. If it's some sort of pivotal enemy you have to fight, maybe there's like a cutscene that plays before the fight starts. Maybe there's some really banging music playing. Or maybe you get some sort of exclusive attack for only that battle. Maybe that battle unlocks a new attack for your character. And if handled correctly, this new attack can feel particularly devastating. And if nothing else, it's a new, fresh ability that the player has access to. It also might help that this new attack is particularly devastating looking and feeling. It's little stuff like having the proper amount of hit stop, which is to say that the game stops for about a couple frames to show that yes, you made an impact. You hit that enemy, you hurt that enemy, and you believe that. And hey, I mean bonus points if the animation itself just looks really cool. Like yeah, do 26 flips consecutively and then land on a dude's head with an axe, that's cool. And see, that's what I mean by the simple stuff being effective. It's all of these individual little things that all of these team members got together and made, bundled together for a perfect little package in this one moment to make this combat encounter feel good. And arguably, the best part, all of these things that I talked about can work for just about any game, not just turn-based stuff. But if turn-based games have any one of these, or all of them being something of a focus for the game, then again, it just couples together to make the combat feel much better. You don't really have all that much agency, but you feel like you do. Because in a strategy game, in a turn-based game, it's your decisions that matter. But focusing on all these little things helps lift the game up to new heights, regardless of what game you're talking about. And actually, what's really cool is that as time went on, turn-based RPGs have continued to evolve themselves, iterating upon the basic necessities of combat in these games. And even getting to the point where a player might question, what's the point of the combat? Is combat really the best option here? In this point, you can insert basically any quirky contemporary RPG you can think of. And I think my previous statement still applies pretty broadly across all of these games. Take Amori, for example. There's a lot going on with this game, and I don't want to spoil any of it because there wouldn't be a point, and also spoilers are lame. But consider for a moment just how much of a sore thumb your main character sticks out as in this game. In particular, how much your primary attack punctuates this feeling of unease that you have, always sitting in the back of your mind. This attack hits all of the notes that it wants to in terms of good turn-based combat, but instead of it being particularly glorious, it makes you feel a little bit uneasy. Even if you say get numb to it as the game goes on, there's still an itchy feeling in the back of your mind that something isn't right here. And once again, it is entirely portrayed by the game's delicate use of sound design and animation. It's a juxtaposition that's always going to be there, whether or not you want it to be there. And despite it being facilitated by such a tiny part of the game, it's powerful. When you use it, it almost has this echoless haunting sound. Part of you doesn't even feel right for even using it. And the craziest thing is that it's just a basic attack. As games continue to be played, they also continue to evolve. Take a second to just consider the angle of an indie dev. You physically don't have the manpower to make the biggest, craziest looking game. maybe it's not entirely polished. So your answer to make it to where people are actually interested in your game is often bringing something completely unique to the table. This, of course, can be facilitated by any number of means, but sometimes, and quite often, indie devs like to go back in time and pick out what was cool from years back. Think about action commands from the Paper Mario series. If you've played those games, they're sort of iconic to that franchise. Yet even still, we're seeing devs of all kinds bring this back in their own way. I know it's maybe not indie, but consider the South Park RPGs. Despite the parody nature of that entire franchise, those two games are completely competent turn-based video games. And they picked the interactive RPG Paper Mario format simply because it was cool. And actually, action commands are a really good way to get an ADHD-addled mind back into the focus of the game. It gives players their agency back in a genre that normally doesn't have it. And that on its own merit is pretty impressive. And actually, for a real indie example, how about Bugfables? This game acts as a love letter to the entire Paper Mario franchise, or just Mario RPG series, plural. The devs of this game both know their players and respect their players enough to make it to where, even if the combat looks really simple, there's options to make it more difficult and more challenging. They understand that people grew up with the Paper Mario games, and maybe they want something a little bit more demanding with this specific gameplay gimmick. And they doubled down on it. They showed that there's value in it and made it a part of the strategy. It's in this way that they not only revitalized the player agency with combat, but also, as I keep mentioning, they understand the little things that makes the combat satisfying. I think in this way, the action commands just multiply it. The attacks still sound good, they still look good, and there's still tension in the combat. And when all's said and done, it might be wise to consider all of these things if you're currently trying to develop your own turn-based RPG. These are tiny aspects of a game that should not at all be slept on. And if handled to the best of one's ability, they, in no small part, will work to make the game that much better. And hey, if nothing else, I think it is worth of giving these parts in these games their due diligence. Whether you're developing a game or you're simply just a player of these games, I think taking the time and deconstructing all of this is worth it. It's just cool to consider. And if you're maybe trying to figure out what makes your JRPG combat good, then hey, I mean, why not start here? And truthfully, I could go on and on for an infinite number of days about this subject. But I think y'all get the point now, so I'll go ahead and wrap up. If you like what I had to say here today, then hey, thanks for watching. If you feel like sticking around, then go ahead and hit the subscribe button. I upload every Friday, and I cover a pretty broad range of topics. If you ended up enjoying the video a lot, then hey, go ahead and like and share the video too. It helps me out a ton, and I really want to get to 500 subscribers before the end of the year. I think that would be cool. I also have a Discord where you can bring your own discussions to the table, or otherwise if you just want to throw out a video idea, then hey, that's what it's there for, and it's completely free to join. Also, if you want to be super nice, I have a Patreon as well. It only has a single $1 a month tier, but donating to it will let me read your name out loud at the end of these videos, and it'll give you access to a Discord channel in the Discord. It's where I post sneak peeks for new videos and stuff like that. But as always, if you don't feel like doing any of that, then don't fret about it. I appreciate you watching all the way to the end. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next Friday. Have a good day, everybody.